Good morning and welcome to Tiger's Great Journey Read Aloud. We are continuing our story of Tiger's Great Journey, and today we are starting with Chapter 7, Never Give Up. The next day before class started, Tiger opened up his Shoka Leader Handbook to review the requirements for class leader. He did not have to do this, but he enjoyed focusing on his future challenges and goals. Some of what he read was already familiar to him. Tiger knew that he was responsible for wearing his black belt Shoka Leader uniform clean and properly tied. He already did so, but he also knew that sometimes his uniform got dirty without him even realizing it, so he'd have to inspect it carefully. What he didn't know until recently was that he needed to wear the complete uniform in public. He had developed the habit of taking his belt off and throwing it over his shoulder and walking around like that. This was too casual. He was told by one of the assistant school leaders. If he needed to react quickly, his belt and the flaps of his uniform could get in his way. He would have to fix this. Tiger also now understood that rules were created to keep people safe. He'd heard how a few years ago, a grandmother had tripped over someone's shoes that were left in the walkway and had nearly gotten hurt. After that, the rule was established that all students had to line their shoes up against the wall when they came in. Tiger was starting to understand that he had both a quiet voice and a powerful voice, and that in giving the class commands, he would need to use his powerful voice. Sensei also talked about the difference between a loud voice and a powerful voice. He'd said that a loud voice was annoying, then he demonstrated a loud voice, and boy, was he right. Everyone in the school either groaned or cringed when he did it. Tiger had also learned the lesson of good manners, and he wished that the kids in his school would learn some too. It seemed that every day kids were acting rude and out of control. He wondered why the principal and teachers allowed this, but he'd also heard there were rules the teachers had to follow. He didn't understand this. Tiger read that he would have to explain to his parents the meaning of confidence and do 3 things he couldn't do before. He now knew that confidence was a belief that people had in themselves, which allowed them to succeed without fear. He'd seen lots of kids at school who didn't have the confidence to raise their hands and speak up, and he wondered just what it was that they were afraid of. He wanted to understand and help them. Tiger also wanted to find out more about the Shoka leadership structure. He was going to ask his assistant school leader to explain more of this to him. He was on the path to become a black belt Shoka leader, and he wanted to learn more about how it worked. He'd read that it was time for him to set a target date for becoming a black belt Shoka leader. This would be exciting because it would give him a concrete goal to work towards. Tiger had been a team leader for about 2 months and had been learning Hansandan, but it hadn't been going so well. One day he was having a lot of difficulty with it and was incredibly frustrated by his inability to improve. He felt like a failure. Sensei saw Tiger looking dejected and walked over to him and asked him what was wrong. I just can't do my kata. I practiced it over and over, but I still can't do it right. I'll never be any good, said Tiger. This wasn't like Tiger to give up so easily, Sensei said gently. The journey to become a black belt Shoka leader is not easy, Tiger. It's long and hard. That is why Shotokan Karate Leadership Schools only select students who have what it takes: intelligence, imagination, and spirit. And you have what it takes, Tiger, or we would not have accepted you as a student. Sensei called out to the class. Come here and sit down. There's something important that we need to talk about. Tiger is feeling frustrated with his kata. He's starting to think that he's never going to get it right, and we need to talk about this because it's common for a student to feel this way. Try this, everyone. Sit in Seiza and clear your mind. The students gathered and sat down in Seiza. Some of them were already quite capable of quickly emptying the mind, but others needed more time. Eventually, they all quieted down. Now ask yourself, what is, and complete the question with whatever you want to know or whatever is frustrating you. In Tiger's case, he would ask himself, what is Hansandan? Then wait for an answer. The universe will send it to you. It might come instantly or it might come over time. You might have to repeat the question many times, but eventually the answer will come. Wendy, what question would you like to ask the universe? I would like to know what one-step sparring is all about, Wendy replied. Great. Then your question is, what is one-step sparring? Sensei told her. Who else has a question? Nolan raised his hand. Nolan? I want to know what a side thrust kick is. I have to do that kick for my assistant class leader rank, said Nolan. Then that's your question. Does everyone get the idea? Os, responded the students in unison. Good. The students spent a few minutes doing this and then continued practicing. About 10 days later, Sensei saw Tiger working on Hansandan and knew that his question had been answered, because the way Tiger was doing his kata was impressive. He saw Wendy doing one-step sparring and Nolan doing Yoko Kikomi Gari, side thrust kick, and he knew that they too had their questions answered. Upon seeing this, Sensei gathered the class and said, "A wise man once stated, obstacles are things a person sees when he takes his eye off the goal." Upon hearing this familiar thought, Tiger perked up. Wow, he thought, that is amazing. Sensei went on, I hope that the problems you faced recently have taught you that black belt Shoka leaders know they will encounter difficulties along the way, but they keep their attention on their goals. They don't let the difficulties they encounter deter them from finishing what they start. Another wise person said that the surest way not to fail is to be determined to succeed. Nolan raised his hand. After Sensei called on him, Nolan asked, is this what it means to endeavor? Yes, Nolan. Endeavor means to never give up. Sensei looked around and saw that Tiger had something on his mind. What is it, Tiger? I think endeavor means to keep trying because each time you perform the kata, you learn something new, even though you may not think so. We can learn from the mistakes we make. Each time we do it, we get better and better. Each time we do it, we get closer to our goal. Sensei looked over at Tiger and smiled. That's right, Tiger. On his way out of the dojo, Tiger was given a list of quotes about the importance of endeavor. He saw that all kinds of people over the years have talked about the need to endeavor. It seemed to Tiger that all the quotes were saying in different ways that to endeavor is to have the determination to complete a task in the face of overwhelming adversity. It is the willingness to continue on despite enormous obstacles. Albert Einstein, the famous scientist, was one of the people who were quoted on the list. He said, learn by making mistakes over and over until you get it right. Anyone who has never made a mistake has never tried anything new. Likewise, the Buddha said, there are only two mistakes one can make along the road to truth, not going all the way and not starting. Tiger also learned that Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president of the United States, had said the only man who never makes a mistake is the man who never does anything. Charles R. Swindoll, the author, educator, and preacher, said, we are all faced with a series of great opportunities brilliantly disguised as impossible situations. The famous swordsman Sakuhara Bokuden, who lived from 1490 to 1571, said, fall 7 times and get up 8 times. Winston Churchill, from 1874 to 1965, was a British prime minister known for leadership during World War II. He said, never give in, never, 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 in nothing great or small, large or petty, never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense. When he arrived home that evening, Tiger did his homework, took out the trash, and helped his mom get the table ready for dinner. Afterwards, he did the dishes and got ready for bed. He was still excited about the day's training when he pulled out the Book of the Empty Mind and started to imagine. And now we are moving on to the next part of our story called The Plains of Endeavor. And you can see Blake and Tiger heading out onto some very vast plains. Let's see what happens. In his imagination, Tiger struggled on with his friend Blake. The surrounding landscape looked the same as far as they could see, just as it did when they first entered the Plains of Endeavor. It seems like this will never end, lamented Blake. He saw the path meandering through the endless fields of emerald green grass swaying in the blustery wind. A footpath veered off into the distance. It looked like it was a shorter and easier walk than the path they were on. Should we take that path? Blake asked. It could shorten our journey. No, replied Tiger. The map shows that we're on the right trail. If we don't find another way, our feet will give out before we get out of here, Blake said. But Tiger remembered that Sensei had once said it was important to stay on the path you were on. He had said endeavor means to be willing and able to continue on despite facing great obstacles. Other paths will deceive you and lead to nowhere. You may get lost and never return. The road is long, but you will be successful in reaching your destination. There are no shortcuts. I'm sorry, Blake, that this is taking so long, but we need to stay the course. Trying another route, hoping for a shortcut, will only get us into a lot of trouble. This journey is not easy, but eventually we'll find our way. Just then an eerie sound came from fairly close by. They were both startled so much by it that they nearly jumped out of their skins. They knew what it was, but hearing it in this place at this time creeped them out. When the howl came again, they saw a wolf on a knoll a couple hundred yards away. It was a magnificent animal in many ways, but a dangerous one nonetheless. Would it attack? The wolf had a bad rap. It was a predator, but was it the ruthless killer that so many believed it was? And what about the belief that dogs, man's best friend, were descended from wolves? So much was not known. And what would this wolf be like? Would he be curious or ravenous? Is he traveling alone or is his pack with him? Tiger and Blake would have to find out. The boys decided that the best thing to do was to keep an eye on the wolf up on the low rise as they kept moving. The trail dipped and turned slightly, and as they rounded a huge boulder, what they saw in front of them gave them the fright of their lives. The wolf was standing in their path, not more than 50 feet in front of them, and looking directly at them. The boys froze. He was nearly as tall as they were. He was nearly as tall as they were, it seemed, but apparently he didn't want to eat them. The boys relaxed somewhat after realizing that he wouldn't attack. But what should they do? He was blocking their path. Why don't we circle around him? Suggested Blake. Good idea, replied Tiger. As they began moving around him in what they hoped would be a wide enough arc, the wolf began circling them. But he wasn't menacing. He was smiling. His eyebrows were raised and his jaws were relaxed. Look, Blake, he wants to play. He's probably never seen people before, and he looks young, added Blake. The boys jumped and crouched, and the wolf jumped and crouched. Tiger barked, and the wolf barked back. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he ran off out of sight. Well, that was cool. I can't believe it, said Blake. That was the reprieve that they both needed. They were suddenly refreshed, and the long journey through the plains of endeavor seemed closer to an end. As they walked the last leg of the trek, Tiger thought back on the lesson of endeavor. Keep training was a continuous admonition that he had heard, not just from Sensei, but from all the black belt Shoka leaders in the dojo. Now he understood what it meant, but he also knew that sometimes it was necessary to take a break from the hard work and have a little fun along the way. As they kept on, darkness fell and it began to rain. The friends were exhausted, but each pitched in to set up the tent. They ate some of their food and before lying down to sleep, looked at the map. Another word, an image, had appeared. This time it was endeavor and a karateka, or student, standing in a side stance. A side stance was the best stance for building strength in the legs and hips, but it required one to spend long periods holding this difficult position. This was a good stance to use for endeavor. Back in Tiger's bedroom, his father watched him sleeping peacefully. He gently took the book from Tiger's grasp, closed it, and put it on the nightstand. He quietly wished Tiger good night and turned off the light. He walked toward the door and took one last loving look at his son before closing it softly. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Next time we will be reading chapter 8, Able to Respond. Hope you have a wonderful day.